Hola y bienvenidos. Hello and welcome to another episode of Meet the Candidates. I'm Lauren Calmet, Political Director here at the Florida Democratic Party. El día de hoy, algunas de las preguntas serán hechas en inglés y otras en español. I will start off with some questions in English for our candidates, and we will finish off with the following question in Spanish. ¿Qué mensaje tienes para la comunidad hispana? Without further ado, let's bring on our candidates. So for our first group today, we have two incredible incumbents. We have Representative Cindy Polo running for her seat in House District 103, as well as Commissioner Eileen Higgins for Miami-Dade County Commission District 5. I am so excited to have both of these incredible women with us today. Eileen Higgins was elected in 2018 to serve as the Miami-Dade County Commissioner for District 5. She has fought and continues to fight for resiliency in the face of a changing environment, common sense gun reforms to keep us safe, and programs that afford everyone an equal shot at the American dream. From more reliable transportation to sea level rise, from affordable housing to better paying jobs, she is a champion for the policies that help everyone in our community succeed. Also with us, we have a lifelong advocate and stay-at-home mom, Cindy Polo. She has been fighting for the most vulnerable her entire life, having won her election also in 2018 as the underdog in an impossible seat to flip. She has worked to ensure that her community's voice is heard. Let's go ahead and kick today's first question off to Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner, can you share with us a bit about the lack of affordable housing in Miami-Dade and the opportunities and challenges that you've seen trying to solve this?
Yeah, well, hi, Lauren. Hi, Rep Polo. Good to be with you. We're the 2018 Flip crowd. So let's talk about affordable housing. It's, as we know in this county, it's a real crisis. People in all levels, whether you're a recent college graduate, a working family, housing is very expensive. And so it is a crisis, and it is a crisis in District 5, which is one of the reasons I set out to work on the three things that we really can do. And one is the county has a lot of land. And so we can actually activate that land in a productive way to make sure we're building more affordable housing on that. And so in District 5, we took a look at everything. There's almost 60 acres of underutilized county land. And right now already I'm either constructing affordable housing or have RFPs out on the street to construct affordable housing on about half of that, with more to come. So essentially, if you put your mind to it, you can find a way to create affordable housing. We, since I've been elected, there's 500 new units. I broke ground on 2 buildings in the middle of COVID, and the plan in the next 4 years is to add or rehabilitate about 4,600 more units. The other thing we need to work on is preserving what we have. And so we've got an innovative program going on in Little Havana right now with the Dade Heritage Trust to buy historic apartment buildings that happen to be affordable, but they're kind of falling apart. Mm-hmm. So the county is providing the bridge money so they can renovate those buildings in keeping their historic nature intact, but in return, they guarantee that they will make these items be affordable in the future. And then the last thing is we got to be able to build these things faster. And so this month at the commission meeting, my legislation that I passed to accelerate permitting for affordable housing, that all affordable housing development goes to the front of the line in every department, so we can shave 6 months off the build time. That will be implemented this month. So there's a lot more we can do, but a lot has been done in District 5. It's my #1 priority for this district.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Commissioner. And also, while we're speaking about the land in Miami-Dade, I'd like to ask Representative Polo about something that I know is happening in her district in Miami-Dade, but also a little bit in Broward as well. Mine blasting has been one of the biggest issues impacting the residents of Northwest Dade as well as Southwest Broward. So outside of this area, many still don't understand this problem, myself included. Representative, could you please talk a little bit about what you've done and what you hope to continue to do to ensure that this topic isn't forgotten?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Commissioner. As she mentioned, we are the class of 2018, all of those improbable seats. And the main thing that we can do, Lauren, is what we're doing right now is we're talking about it. Prior to 2018, no elected official was really talking about this issue that we, the residents of House District 103, have been living with for decades. There's still residents in our area that have cracks in their structures and yet don't know where it's coming from. And the reason they don't know is because the blast happened usually during lunchtime. And so for years, this has been occurring where most people work outside of their home. Now, as the stay-at-home orders, unfortunately now are expiring and we're starting to reopen, folks have been home during these last few months and working from home. And so they have felt what feels like an earthquake. It happens anywhere from 3 to 4 times a week. Wow. Around lunchtime. Wow. And it is about a 4-mile radius from the blasting site. So right on the county line, we have a natural occurrence of lime rock that is basically excavated. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's a good industry, an industry that brings a lot of revenue to the state of Florida. 70% of our building supplies, whether it's for roads or homes, come from these materials that are brought out from the ground. However, because of failed policies over just a series of, whether it was lack of local leadership, but definitely at the state level, we have developed around this area and there are residential communities around it. And so what we have been trying to do was, one, make it a topic, which we did. We forced elected officials to have to take a position, especially in this area. They have to mention it. It was never something that was used as, as a platform issue. And so that has been the first step. Also educating my colleagues. When you go up to Tallahassee as a representative, you're not just voting on the budget and legislation. You're also essentially the PR manager for your district, which is to educate folks on what is happening back home. And so we have hosted a series of tours going through homes, whether it's in Miramar, whether it's in Miami Lakes, Palm Springs North, and Hialeah, so that they can see the cracks that are really sort of attacking our residents' number one investment, which is usually your home. And so, we're in the minority party, so having legislation that we champion isn't necessarily the path that Republican leadership has allowed us to. But what I do is I allow them to have the win, run the bills. Let it be your rally cry or your win, because the constituents are really the ones that need the help. And so the very first thing is to constantly use my platform to talk about it, because the homeowners here have for a very long time not had adequate representation. And so the first step is to make sure that we educate folks on what it is that we live through every day.
Thank you, Representative. And I'd also like to ask the both of you about another issue that's been hitting Miami-Dade really hard, which of course is COVID-19. So Commissioner, how are businesses recovering, and what's the role of the county in helping the local business community survive this pandemic?
Well, businesses are recovering slowly, although not all of them, right? We know that. So the role of the county is twofold, right? Because we are supposed to manage the health of our residents as well as the health of our economy. And that is a balancing act. Mm-hmm. And so the county has been cautious in trying to make sure that we are scheduling openings based on the numbers. Now, I realize this week the governor did something different. It's a free-for-all now. But the reality is we put in place measures where people can begin to go into restaurants, eat outside of restaurants, and shop and feel safe. And most business owners are going to continue to comply with those, I believe. What we've got to do to support these businesses while they're struggling this is get the CARES Act money moving to them as quickly as possible. And so the county has mobilized hundreds of millions of dollars, about half of which is going to businesses. And I use the word businesses because it could mean a restaurant, it could be a hair salon, but our residents are employed in all kinds of ways. For example, the arts community, that's a $1.4 billion industry that is completely shuttered. And so we have hundreds of people, some of which might be like musicians and dancers, but others who are accountants that work at these places. And so we've mobilized money, both loans and grants, to help all kinds of businesses. And then one of the things I'm very proud to have sponsored is the creation of the Rise Miami-Dade Fund, which will be a permanent fund. We have never had a revolving loan fund for our tiniest businesses, right? The ones with less than 25 employees, which by the way, is 80% of our economy. And so that will live on post-COVID. So the business community, there's lots of things you can apply for, whether you're a restaurant, a small business, an arts community, veterans-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. Please reach out to my office. Doesn't matter where you live in the county, we'll direct you to the right place to see if we can get some grant money from the CARES into your pocket. And then the other half of the money has been spent on our residents, right? We have rental relief programs, landlord relief programs, really trying to get money into the hands of the human beings that have lost their jobs.
Thank you, Commissioner. And of course, Representative Polo, one of the areas that you represent is Hialeah, which has a great population of older constituents. So, Representative, what measures need to be taken to get out the message to them that COVID is still rampant, despite, Miami-Dade being open under DeSantis's executive order?
Well, I would say that the very first and most important thing that needs to get done is that residents need to vote. You just heard an amazing commissioner talk about all of the initiatives that are happening at the local level. And the reason that matters is because it is all of those down ballot races that are making these day-to-day decisions. I unfortunately served with colleagues that felt like we were too busy to hold a special session to discuss the realities of what our community is facing, not just lack of jobs or fear of this unemployment crash that we've had, but in addition to it, the fact that we are still dealing with a health crisis. And so unfortunately, as state legislators, most of us have just turned into basically in a way, sort of messengers of helping people navigate through this unemployment system that was designed to fail. We have managed to try to spread true and accurate information as we receive it. But our job as legislators was to go back up to Tallahassee and review the budget and be able to fix the issues that are affecting our community. Unfortunately, we are led by a party that felt that photo ops were more important during COVID than it was to actually do their job. And you know, as we list all of these wonderful initiatives, if there is anything that I want the viewers to know is that these down ballot races, we may not have the funds and you may not know our names, and we won't be on TV as much as let's say as the presidential election, which obviously is important, but it is up and down the ballot, the decisions that are affecting you, that you wake up, the ones that keep you up at night, that's your commissioners, that's your state legislators that have the opportunity to give you a better shot at this crazy crisis that we're going through right now. So, you know, you're going to hear from a lot of folks, and you're going to hear a lot about the issues. But I think the most important thing is for all of you to understand that you are part of this process, and you absolutely have to hold accountable all the folks that have failed us, especially in these last few months.
Thank you, Representative. And I'd love to open that conversation up about voting. Commissioner, could you please share with us, what is Miami-Dade County doing to make sure that residents are feeling safe voting from home? And can you talk about the safety of vote by mail overall?
Yeah, so get ready. October 1st, the ballots will be going out from the county and into your mailboxes. As evidenced by the last election, for the most part, if you mailed your ballot early enough, we received it and we were able to count it. Now, don't forget, you got to sign the back on it, right? So read the instructions, people, right? It's like, what's that song? Signed, sealed, delivered. In our case, it's sealed, signed, delivered. Do not forget to put your signature and write a nice signature the way you probably did your voter registration. So the sooner you send that in, the sooner you can track it, right? So the county, you know, our elections office, it'll tell you they've received your ballot and they've counted your ballot, because we count our ballots before Election Day. And then they are required to let you know if your signature mismatched. That gives you time to fix it. For anybody that wants a different solution, we have 33 early voting sites open starting on the 19th, and they're open every day, including Saturdays and Sundays, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Every site has a vote by mail drop-off box. You can drive up, skateboard up, bike up, walk up, however you want to get there. So it's very safe if you're in a high-risk COVID community. You can just drop your ballot in, no questions asked, or if you prefer, bring your ID. And then the trained professional there will check that, make sure that it's your signature, tell you that your ballot's completed perfectly, you know, and they'll put it in. And then there can never be a signature mismatch, because they have proven that that ballot was your ballot through your ID. So if it were me, I would bring my ID. But if you forget it or you're bringing your wife's ballot, it's fine. You can drop that off. But we are able to vote in person. And I actually voted on Election Day last time because I wanted to be there in person to see what it felt like to be voting during COVID. And I can tell you our elections department did a great job at social distancing, making sure that all their staff, there was wipies everywhere, cleaning down the scanners. So it felt like a very, very safe experience to me. I certainly encourage you to vote early or vote by mail, particularly if you're in a high risk category. I am not in a high risk category. So for me to go on Election Day, it felt like a safe choice. But for a huge part of our population, they should not be making that decision. They should be voting by mail, dropping that in their either their post office box or coming to the early voting site and just trying to make sure your vote is counted. So get out there and vote. You're going to get your ballots this weekend.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And speaking of the election, Representative Polo, I'd like to ask you about a very hot button issue that we continue to hear every election cycle. Undocumented immigrants continue to pay billions in taxes every year. And now, due to the pandemic, many domestic workers have lost their jobs, yet there is no help that they can receive from the state. So, Representative, what can you do as a legislator to address that?
Well, I think what one is to obviously use our platform to continue to educate. And apparently our undocumented immigrants are paying more taxes than the gentleman that occupies the White House. And so I think that, we have to continue to use our platforms to stand up for the most vulnerable. We represent not just those who vote for us or just those that participate in the voting process. We represent those that are unable to vote, whether it's because of their immigration status, whether it's age, whether it's just disenfranchisement. And so we have to continue to, use our platform for that. On the state level, we will continue to fight the anti-immigrant rhetoric and anti-immigrant policies that have plagued, our state and our country, especially over the last few years. And working alongside with many of our colleagues and allies to continue to reach out to all corners and all parts of our community so that they are aware of the resources that are available to them and that we continue to bring them along in this process. And for me specifically, it's always standing up for them. As a daughter of Colombian immigrants, I know what it's like to go through that immigration process and not feeling that there's many advocates on your side. And now, fortunately, many of us have, we're a different generation and have a different experience, and to be able to honor our parents' struggle by helping others, I think is really the first role as a public servant. We use titles as representatives and politicians and elected officials, but really what our jobs are to be a servant to our community. And that's exactly what we should be doing.
Thank you, Representative. And I'll go ahead and follow that up with a question in Spanish. ¿Qué mensaje tienes para la comunidad hispana? En español, please.
Claro. Bueno, hola a todos los latinos que me están escuchando. Lo más importante es usar su voto, usar su voz, saber que las personas tienen que representarlos. Y en esta área y en esta era de todos los sustos que estamos pasando con COVID y con el miedo que nos tratan de meter, tienen que asegurarse de tener un plan de votar. Sea que lo van a hacer por correo, sea que lo van a hacer el día de elección, pero hagan un plan para que sepan qué es lo que van a hacer y no lo deje hasta último momento. Si van a mandar su boleta por correo, por favor, séllelo y no se le olvide firmarlo. Y si no lo quiere mandar por correo, en todos los diferentes locales donde va a haber apertura para votación, pueden dejar sus boletas, van a estar áreas marcadas donde puede dejar su boleta, pero hágalo con tiempo, porque si hay algún tipo de error, si lo hace con tiempo, entonces hay suficiente tiempo para poder corregir ese error. Pero lo más importante es que nosotros como latinos tenemos que usar el voto. Hay muchos que sacrificaron sus vidas, sus familias, dejaron sus patrias para que nosotros pudiéramos tener una mejor vida. Y el mejor modo de poder honrar eso es usando nuestra voz, que es votar. Por favor, voten.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner, anything to add?
Well, bueno, en esta elección tenemos opciones que son importantísimos, no solamente a nivel federal, pero a nivel local y estatal también. Entonces es importante, cuando ustedes voten, considere los valores que tiene su familia y los valores que tiene un candidato o una candidata, ¿sí? Porque es importante para seleccionar personas que tienen la comunidad en su mente, no el poder. Porque tenemos dos opciones en el mundo, ¿sí? Personas que quieren ser en poder o personas que quieren servirles. Y estos caminos son diferentes. Entonces, escoge bien, escucha bien y evalúa sus candidatos y sus selecciones con mucho trabajo, porque su futuro depende de esto. En términos de asuntos locales, ¿quiere que el sistema de transporte mejore? Bueno, quizás la hora ha llegado para seleccionar una persona que no ha creado los problemas que hemos tenido por décadas, ¿sí? El mismo con el crisis de viviendas asequibles, ¿sí? Por décadas, nadie en la comisión trabajó para añadir vivienda asequible en una manera rapidísima. Entonces, su comunidad, su barrio, su familia está en el baloto este año, ¿sí? Entonces, piense de sus valores y su familia y vote el 3 de noviembre.
Genial, gracias. Thank you so much. It was so great to see the both of you, and I am very excited to bring on our next group of candidates. Next up, we have JP Bado running for HD 114, Lucia Baez-Geller for Miami-Dade School Board District 3, and Francesca Sesti Brown running for House District 115. This first question, I'll introduce JP first. Jean-Pierre, or JP, is a resident of District 114, a practicing attorney, and of course, a Democrat. He's a decorated veteran leading soldiers into combat zone and bringing them back all safely to their homes. He was raised in a single-parent home by his mother and aunt and knows full well the struggles that families face. JP and his wife, Carolyn, have been married for 4 years and are proud owners to their rescue dog, Lorenzo. So JP, first off, thank you so much for your service to our country, and thank you for joining us today. So, being a combat veteran, you of course have a better understanding and respect for guns than most. Do you think that guns in schools will make our children and teachers more safe?
The answer is of course not. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be with such a fine group of candidates. It's truly been an honor and a privilege to get to know these candidates and of course the supporters and volunteers in the campaign. Very briefly, I can remember at this point 25 years ago being on an Army base and thinking about sort of the training that we were going through. I happened across a document that was placed there by members of the NRA on and what we call the MWR facilities, the Morale, Welfare, and Recreation facilities. And I remember the words to this day. It read sort of like a 10 Commandments. And right at the top, the first commandment was simply that before you shoot, think about what you will hit if you miss. And I thought that was great advice. I thought that was such great advice that I actually incorporated that into my training. It never occurred to me that those same words would haunt me all these years later, because every time we hear of another incident, I think about those words. And so, of course, we cannot have guns in schools. There's no place for them in classrooms. And when I think about the legislature's recent Guardian program, there's so many things wrong with it. From, conceptually, just having guns in classrooms is wrong, but we're taking away dollars from the Department of Education, from our school districts, and using their money that should be going to teachers, that should be going to facilities, that should be going to materials and curriculum, and having them use those funds to pay for the training for these guards. Our school systems are taxed quite enough already. We need to focus on education, because public education is the foundation to the American dream. And if we're focused on putting guns in school, we're making our kids unsafe and we're really harming our future.
Thank you, JP, for sharing that. And while we're talking about schools, I'll go ahead and introduce another one of the candidates that I have on screen with us right now. Lucia Baez-Geller has 15 years of teaching experience at Miami Beach Senior High School and has been a part of this community for over 30 years. She is a first-generation Colombian, Cuban-American, and has been a steward and active member of her teachers union and has been active with education policy in Miami-Dade County, Tallahassee, and Washington, D.C. Welcome, Lucia. Please share with us a little bit about why you're running.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that's here for running and being amazing candidates. It's really inspiring to hear everybody speak and to see you in action. But I'm Lucia Baez-Geller, as you said. Thank you, Lauren. And I'm running because I believe in the last 15 years, I've noticed that every student, every child has the potential to greatly succeed. And I want to make sure that I contribute to that. And just being someone growing up, education was a priority in my household. My mom worked really hard to make sure that I could succeed. And my teachers also really taught me to strive for excellence, that good was never good enough. I had to really be my best self. And for the past 15 years, I've had the privilege and the honor of allowing that opportunity to all the students that have passed through my classroom, thousands of them now, to really instill in them a passion for education and to let them see the value in education. And so I want to bring that firsthand knowledge to my candidacy and to my school board, experience. And it's really because I've seen what works and what doesn't work. I've seen the effects of really bad policy, really good policy. And it's really become a passion of mine to speak out and advocate for those policies and to make sure that we have a system where our students feel safe, where we can have mental health and other resources available for them, where there's accountability and transparency, where we have a world-class education, and where we're funding equitably so that everybody has all the opportunities.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And we certainly do have a great group of candidates. Just offline, well, as we were getting ready for today's show, JP had mentioned how he's on the show today with so many powerful women. So I am very excited to introduce another powerful woman on the screen. Democrat Francesca Sesti Brown is a working mom, businesswoman, and community advocate. Her family immigrated from Peru when she was 8, and she is a proud graduate of Miami-Dade Public Schools and a first-generation college student. She is running to provide a new voice in Tallahassee and our state legislature. So while we're on the topic of girl power, please share with us. You will be, of course, the first woman elected to this seat. So how will you use your platform to get more women and minorities to run for office?
That's a great question. Thank you, Lauren. Honored to be here with JP and Lucia, amazing candidates. And this just goes to show you how we also all need to work across all levels of government and the importance of that in order to move our community forward, right? We can't work in silos. And I think this panel really shows how it's a collaborative effort. I always like to say it takes a village to raise our children, to build strong communities. So definitely it does encompass that. Look, I am a first-time candidate. I never thought I would run for office. I've always been serving my community as a nonprofit, community, executive. And so helping and understanding the needs of my community is something that I've been doing forever. But I also realize that there's this gap and disconnect between our elected officials and us here, the people, right? So then through my campaign, I really engage folks to increase their civic engagement, show them that we do have to be engaged, even when we feel extremely disillusioned and disconnected and forgotten, especially during this time. And so, yeah, having people know that someone that is where they're from, that looks like them and can really relate to them and their stories, I hope that really shows that they can do it too. If they have that fire in their belly, that they want to make a difference, that something's not right. I hope that my experience, just like honestly, Representative Cindy Polo did that for me, following her race last cycle and just seeing how she did it. And it was all about the people. That was just like, that's it. So now with my race and all of our races here, we're showing that this can be done. As long as we lead with our love for humanity and people first, we would prevail. So it's a great question.
Thank you, Francesca. And since both you and JP are running for the state legislature, I'd like to touch upon an issue that I know that a lot of the folks on today's show don't feel like is getting prioritized enough. South Florida is, of course, the epicenter of climate change and sea level rise. So, JP, what would you do as a state representative to help combat climate change and prepare South Florida for the future?
Well, thank you. That is a particularly important topic for District 114, as well as it is for other districts. There's a reason why climate change, and in particular sea level rise, is the first priority on my website. And that's because in our district, we're very diverse geographically. But I point to Pinecrest in particular. Half of Pinecrest is in my district, and Pinecrest isn't on the sewer system. It's all septic tanks, and so I've had plenty of discussions with members of the community, with leaders in Pinecrest, with members of the council, and political leaders who all agree something has to be done. And what we see is over the last few years, Republican priorities just haven't been in concert with the priorities of our municipalities. And I single out Pinecrest, but South Miami, Cutler Bay, these are all areas where sea level rise has either a similar or just as an important effect. Cutler Bay at the very south of the district, there's really only three ways to go north-south in Cutler Bay. I would say during rush hour, US 1 is a parking lot. So folks are left to cut through neighborhoods on 87, Franjo Road, maybe 97 or 107 tops, right? And the problem is that those areas are, number one, going through a lot of residential areas, and number two, don't have a real means for getting thoroughfare once you have a lot of rainfall, and especially in that when flooding occurs. The long and the short of it is that we've had studies done specifically in Cutler Bay, but throughout the district, where we've come up with solutions for at least mitigating until we ultimately solve these problems. We just haven't had the political will to follow through. And so when I look at a $93.5 billion budget, and I think of sort of the fraud, waste, and abuse that we've seen in those numbers, I can't help but think that there is a lot of money there to devote to projects that have already passed through the study phase to actually implement for our neighbors and for our communities. And so that's where I would like to focus on, because look, we all live in Miami. We all know that this is an issue. Republican or Democrat or independent, it affects all of us. And so the legislature for the last 10 years in particular has had its head in the sand. And as a first-time candidate, whether my political career lasts 2 years, 20 years, or something in between, climate change and sea level rise will be at the forefront of my fight for the people of this community.
Thank you. And I'd also like to touch base with this group about a hot issue that is affecting Miami-Dade. So Lucia, I'll go to you first. As far as COVID goes, can you talk a little bit about the concerns that students, teachers, and parents have with the transition back to schools in Miami-Dade County?
Yes, and it's happening right now in real time. And the concerns are, before and as we transition back in the next week, it looks like, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. And unless we can secure that everyone is safe, we're all calling for some sort of a delay. Doesn't mean that we're not going to eventually open, but we need to make sure that every life is going to be accounted for and that we can protect them. And so it's really important that we're focusing on a few things when it comes to our schools. For example, implementation, who's going to do what resources will be available at what time. Also redesigning our workday in our school sites. How does our day-to-day life change now with the COVID reality? And of course, health. What happens if a teacher contracts the virus? what's going to happen if a student gets sick? What are the procedures? And in all of this, we want to make sure that teacher voices are being heard. And unfortunately, in the back and forth and the politicization of COVID, it's really becoming an issue. And if a teacher doesn't feel safe, or a parent, what are going to be the resources available to kind of say, hold on a second? And right now, our teachers, speaking from that point of view, they're having to choose between their life and a paycheck. And it's really unfortunate to put people in that position. So we want to make sure we establish protocols, that we're dealing with things on an individual basis, a school by school basis, and that we have a trusting community where we know we have trust in the institution that they're going to keep us safe. And I'm not sure that we're there just yet.
Thank you, Lucia. And of course, COVID has thrown a huge curveball for students, teachers, and parents, and also for small businesses. They've been affected in a very big way. So, Francesca, what are some solutions that you would put at the forefront to help these small businesses get back on track?
Yeah, great question. So we're all connected, right? Small businesses, working families, our school, our teachers. So we're all connected, and making sure that we also think about our economy as we're thinking of how do we get through COVID and come out of this in a very, very positive way. So getting people back to work, helping our schools reopen safely. And I want to echo exactly what Lucia said, making sure everyone's voice is heard. And people and teachers and parents have options, and fixing our broken unemployment system. I think that's the biggest thing that I keep hearing, honestly, from small businesses, is that the assistance isn't coming. It's not coming fast enough. If the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, would have been extended, or they would have had more information at the beginning, now through these partial opening stages that they were in, they could have kept staff longer. Some small businesses are afraid to let their staff go or feel bad because our unemployment system is such a mess, right? Ranked 47th in the country of the worst unemployment benefit. So it's all tied together. And I think making sure we're listening to them, making sure the governor waited so long to just get the resources we needed from the federal government, and be that voice and work again across our counties, our cities, to make sure that we are listening to our small businesses and have set asides, whether it's grant programs or low interest loans for them. And then also understanding their needs. And different fields and sectors have been impacted differently in the small business area. So making sure that we create a task force and include not only leaders from the local cities and counties, but also small businesses from different areas to understand what is it that they need. Do they need help procuring PPP? PPE. And that's one of the biggest things. We're not helping that. We're just adding to the demand, but not helping it. We can create a statewide procurement system to assist small businesses to purchase this PPE at a reduced cost. We haven't talked about that yet. And so it's putting a lot of burden on our small businesses and our working families to make sure that they stay safe while still trying to get those paychecks. Like Lucia was saying, it's a hard time, and making sure we hear the people is number one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And before we shift to our next group, I'd like to ask you each a question in Spanish. ¿Qué mensaje tienes para la comunidad hispana? JP, let's start with you.
Bueno, como niño, mi tío Álvaro una vez me dio una ramita y lo pude quebrar muy fácilmente. Pero cuando me dio como 6 o 7 más, no era tan sencillo. Y encontré en esa lección que somos mucho más fuertes unidos, juntos, que cuando estamos solos. Y necesitamos líderes que van a servir por los demás, que luchan por sus vecinos, que no tienen miedo de decirlo a ellos en poder que están equivocados. Y como latinos, como demócratas, tenemos que estar de acuerdo con hacer con pelear con ellos, pero pelear juntos y no distraídos por todo lo que está pasando en esta época. Como latinos somos fuertes, juntos y no divididos. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Lucía.
Buenas, hola mi gente, soy Lucia Baez Geller. Estoy corriendo para representarlos a todos ustedes en la Junta Escolar de Miami-Dade. Soy profesora de 15 años y vengo aquí para decirles que votar es extremadamente importante para nuestras comunidades y para todos. Por favor, asegúrense de votar desde el principio de la balota hasta el final, donde me van a encontrar a mí para la Junta Escolar. No solo para presidente, todas las carreras que tenemos ahora en el 2020 van a cambiar nuestras vidas. Es hora que nuestras comunidades hagan oír su voz y que todos seamos parte del proceso. Todas nuestras comunidades deben ser protegidas y nuestros derechos deben ser protegidos y debemos garantizar un buen futuro con nuestro voto. Gracias.
Gracias, Lucía. Francesca.
Buenas, saludos para todos. Me llamo Francesca Safety Brown. Me lancé como candidata para la Cámara de Representantes de la Florida para asegurarnos que tengamos una voz y que el gobernador sepa lo que nuestras comunidades necesiten, especialmente durante esta pandemia, porque necesitamos proteger nuestra economía, traer más empleos, abriendo nuestras escuelas de una manera saludable y segura y arreglando nuestro sistema de desempleo. Voten por mí este noviembre, el número 47 en la boleta. Y ahora más que nunca tenemos que participar en las elecciones. Su voz es su voto y nuestro futuro depende de nuestro voto. Por favor, no se olviden de votar.
Gracias. Thank you so much for joining us. It was great to speak with each of you. Next up, we have Ricky Junquera running for House District 118 and Cindy Lerner running for Miami-Dade County Commission District 7. First up, I have a question for Ricky Junquera, who is the Regional Press Secretary for Sierra Club and Vice Chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. He is also a proud Cuban-American son and community activist. Ricky, on experience alone, why do you believe that you would represent your constituency better in Tallahassee?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did not know anything about my opponent pre-COVID. And the only reason why I got to know who he was trying to go through his social media, his professional representative social media feed to see what his response was to our community in the face of the COVID pandemic. And unfortunately, what I found was that he was doing nothing to assist people in filing for unemployment or checking on their unemployment status. He wasn't sending out a message of protect yourself and protect your family, social distance and wear a mask. He was not doing the things that I would expect of myself as a representative and of a community leader to begin with. More than that, my experience at the Sierra Club, I have spent my career working in the reddest states in our country to pass meaningful environmental protection legislation and legislation that'll hold polluters accountable in Indiana, in Kentucky, in Ohio, places where I work with a Republican majority state legislator to help pass the most progressive agenda that we can and to pass legislation that protects our clean water, our clean air, and that protects our natural lands. And so I say to my constituents and I say to everyone watching now, what would you rather have? Someone who's just a rubber stamp on Republican priorities, or someone who fights for their constituents regardless if they're Republican, Democrat, or no party affiliation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, I'll go ahead and introduce our other candidate that we have with us who certainly knows a lot about the state legislature. We have Cindy Lerner. She was raised in District 7, served as mayor of Pinecrest for 8 years, and as a state representative prior to that. She was president of the Miami-Dade County League of Cities and is recognized statewide as a leader on climate change and sea level rise. So, Cindy, this next question is for you. Both you and your opponent are lawyers and have previously served in public office. How would you contrast your qualifications, experience, and competency that would convince the voters to vote for you? Cindy?
That's a great question, especially as we've heard from the prior candidates, what a critical issue this is for South Florida and Miami-Dade County. So as mayor of Pinecrest for 8 years, I made the implementation of the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact a priority and went to work creating a stormwater master plan for Pinecrest, and working with my neighboring cities to address the other challenges with our carbon footprint. I started a transit program in Pinecrest to transport our middle and high school students back and forth to have an impact and mitigate our footprint. And I realized that comparing what we were doing in Miami-Dade County with what was going on in the other South Florida counties, we were far behind what we should be doing. And that was as a result of the failure of leadership by the county and the lack of collaboration. Being the president of the Miami-Dade League of Cities gave me the opportunity to coalesce and bring all of our cities together with a shared vision for how we wanted to work together and work with the county. That is an asset that I bring to District 7 to hit the ground running, and having had the experience of addressing these critical needs. I would also say, in terms of endorsements, our state representatives and state senators that represent District 7, Representatives Nick Duran and Javier Fernandez, and Senators Jose Javier Rodriguez and Annette Tadeo, all four have endorsed me to be the next commissioner for District 7. So clearly they would like to be able to collaborate on the issues that we are trying to address in District 7 and bring back the resources that we need from the state level. So that gives me, again, a foot up on my opponent.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Ricky, I'd like to turn to you about an issue that we've been hearing a whole lot about lately. I'd like to talk about what the COVID-19 response was. Ricky, what do you wish that response would have looked like from the representative in your district?
Yeah, and that's a question I've been getting a lot too. I just got off the phone with the Miami Herald that's doing a piece on this race, and I had to say, with our governor now shoving phase 3 reopening down our throat at a time when people are still very worried. And I canvass independents, Republicans, and Democrats in my district, and they're all worried. They're worried because they don't understand what a full reopening will look like, what it'll mean for their aging parents. They don't know what it will look like for their sick and people with pre-existing conditions. And that's the issue that's most irritating to me from the very beginning, right? From the middle of March, when we found out that this pandemic was coming and that we needed to arm ourselves and protect ourselves, neither the state representative in my district or the governor, for that matter, did anything to show people from the beginning that we had to be responsible and we had to adhere to social distancing and wearing a face mask and protecting our most vulnerable family members. We didn't get that message from the beginning. We got the message that Donald Trump fed to them, that unfortunately led to people not adhering to those policies throughout the entire pandemic. And with the stop and start and open and phases of reopening that have come and gone, we've seen that it hasn't had a positive impact on our economy. The way that we closed did not have a great impact on our economy. None of these things were well thought of, and none of these responses were put in place in the right way. And so I say, like I said to the Miami Herald from the beginning, the response from the governor and from state legislators and the Republican majority in both legislative chambers, we didn't see leadership. All we saw was people looking out for their best interest, looking out for their business interests, and giving the top 1% of our corporations over $500 million at a time when they already knew that our economy would be struggling, that we would have massive unemployment, and that we would have all of our small businesses wondering if they would even be able to open their doors back up post. Now, more than 7 months later, unfortunately, we're in a position where Miami-Dade County is not ready to fully reopen. But because there is the permanence of a general election on November 3rd, the governor understands that if he does not force a full reopening, that it does not help the narrative set by the president and set by the governor that things are going the way they need to be. Well, our constituents and our voters are not dumb. They understand that we are not where we need to be. Our businesses are not where they need to be, and they are not confident that they can reopen their doors and fully protect their staff and their family. And it's a problem. We need real leadership in Tallahassee. We need leadership that is not afraid to hold their own members to account. And I believe that that is the biggest difference between myself and my opponent. Again, like I said, I have worked across the aisle. I have worked with Republicans in the reddest of our country's states to pass legislation, to work to compromise and bring real change for the people in many different states. And I'd love to do it here in my home state of Florida. I am honored and privileged to be here with Mayor and Representative Cindy Lerner. And she has been one mentor in the environmental movement, someone who has been steadfast and dedicated to the issues of the environment here in Miami-Dade County. And I can't wait to work with her as a county commissioner and me at the state level to be able to pass some of these comprehensive ideas to fix, our water table issues, to fix the issues in Biscayne Bay that are not a one-trick fix. We need to do the gradual things that are required to be able to move on some of this stuff. And you're going to need real environmentalists that have bona fides in this field to be able to fix them. And I think that Mayor Lerner and myself are definitely more than qualified.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ricky. And of course, we know that you've just been, a very strong advocate for environmental issues. So Cindy, I'd like to go to you to expand a little bit more on that, because we know that you've been recognized as a statewide leader in this. Concerns about the impacts of sea level rise and climate change continue to weigh heavily on voters in District 7. So what did you, as mayor of Pinecrest, do to address those issues?
As I mentioned before, I tried to follow the plans that were put forward through the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact. In addition to that, I joined the National League of Cities and ended up chairing the Energy, Environment, Natural Resources Committee in the time that I served as mayor for the last couple of years, which gave me a fabulous opportunity to travel all over the country to participate in many conferences throughout the country and actually internationally as well. I had the privilege of speaking my last year as mayor, one of only 30 mayors from the entire country, at the U.S.-China Climate Leaders Summit in Beijing. So that gives me such a wealth of information on understanding what we need to do. I have a very clear vision of what Miami-Dade should be doing, should have been doing all along. And the first step is to create a climate vulnerability and sea level vulnerability assessment countywide. Believe it or not, that has never been done by this county. We don't have a full assessment of where our highest risks are, not only to the built environment and all of our assets that are part of local governments, but to populations, and to address it by prioritizing where are the most vulnerable populations vulnerable to the excesses of heat and sea level rise and gentrification. We've got to sit down and create a dedicated committee at the county commission level that will focus exclusively on all of these issues, the mitigation of our carbon footprint and the adaptation through natural and built adaptations to protect us in the future. There are very clear protocols to follow. I started them in Pinecrest. We were recognized as a municipality, as leaders in that effort, and now it's time for that leadership to move into at the county level.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And Ricky, I know that you had talked about this just a little bit, but I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more. Why did you get into this race?
Yeah, and that's something that obviously the pandemic has shifted. I got into this race because I have a mother with a pre-existing condition. And first and foremost, I was running on healthcare. When I filed to run in October of last year, it was because I have a mother with multiple sclerosis, and I've been the one taking her to her doctor's appointments and finding out once they're waiting to see the doctor to be told that they didn't take our healthcare. They didn't take her insurance. And it's lost upon me that my mother has Medicare and Medicaid and no doctors that would see her. We've had this issue in our family for over 10 years. She was diagnosed my freshman year of college. And it's something that a lot of people face. And unfortunately, when you come from a poor family, you already know too well that the only option available to you when a family member gets sick is to go to the emergency room. It's the only way that your family member will get seen and treated. And then you deal with the consequences and the bill of that after the fact. You feel very ashamed. I've felt ashamed. But it's something that shouldn't happen, not in our families and not if you have insurance. And so I think, not only can we do better by our seniors and our members of our family and our community with pre-existing conditions, but we can do more for the people in our community that don't actively have insurance. We all pay federal taxes, and our federal tax dollars have given us funds to be able to assure that more Floridians have access to healthcare. By expanding Medicaid in the state of Florida, we would provide more than 800,000 people with healthcare benefits. That's pre-pandemic. Now, because of the pandemic, so many more people would be able to qualify for that healthcare program. And so it's unfortunate that our members of our state legislature have not done that. In a state that I work in very, very often, Kentucky, one of the reddest states in our country, they were one of the first to pass Medicaid expansion. And you know what? That's the reason why Mitch McConnell is having such a hard time in his current reelection campaign, because there you can't mess with their healthcare benefits. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, or NPA. They care about having their healthcare benefits, and they would do anything to protect it. We need to do the same here in Florida now more than ever. But that's why I got into the race in the first place. Having a sick parent, you don't know what it feels like to see a family member in so much pain and have no way of helping them. And then seeing them finally show you in their facial expression a sign of relief and being able to be in less pain. I can't tell you, what that feels like. I can't explain it to you. But what I can do is make sure that as many people in the state of Florida are insured and have more options than going to an emergency room and having that last ditch effort to save their family member. And so that's why I ran. That's why I chose to run. And now I'm running for so many more reasons, because the lack of leadership in my own district, the lack of leadership shown by the current representative is just something I can't stand for. And I'm very outspoken, even within the Democratic Party. I'm not one to hold back, and I won't be one to hold back in Tallahassee.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for sharing your story with us. That was incredibly powerful. And we've just about run up on all the time we have. But Ricky, I'll give you our last question to answer in Spanish, please. ¿Qué mensaje tienes para la comunidad hispana?
Mira, para nuestra comunidad, mi familia es como tu familia. Mis padres son republicanos y van a votar por Trump, pero tenemos que pensar más de nuestra familia y lo que hace alguien como representante estatal en Tallahassee. Las cosas que voy a estar yo fajando por son para seguro médico para nuestra familia, para mejor pago para todos nuestros trabajadores. Yo no creo que hay alguien ahora que se faje contra poniendo nuestro valor por hora de trabajo a más de $7 y $75 75 centavos la hora. Nadie puede trabajar por 8.75? Nadie. So, yo creo que ahora, más que nunca, tenemos la oportunidad de hablar con republicanos en Tallahassee para aumentar nuestro salario, porque nadie puede ganar ese salario y poder darle comida a sus familias. Nadie puede ahora, más que nunca, decir que pueden ir sin seguro médico. En este tiempo, en estos tiempos, nuestros representantes tienen que estar ahí luchando por nosotros, luchando por nuestra comunidad. Y honestamente, el representante ahora no lucha por nadie, ni en su Twitter, ni Facebook, ni ningún lugar. Este hombre no lucha por nadie. Y yo lucho por todos. Mi familia republicana, mi familia demócrata y mi familia de nuestras generaciones, de mis abuelos, hasta las generaciones de mis sobrinos. Tenemos que hacer mejor. Y yo pienso que tú vas a votar más por la persona y lo que ellos van a luchar por ti, más que nada. Noviembre 3 y anteriormente con tu boleta ausente, vote Ricky Junquera por representante estatal en el distrito 118, número 51 en tu boleta.
Genial. Gracias, Ricky. Thank you so much, Cindy. And to all of our candidates who joined us today, it was an absolute pleasure to speak with each and every one of you. And thank you so much to all of our viewers who tuned in tonight. It was a pleasure to have you viewing with us. And of course, don't forget to vote. Thank you once again for tuning in.